Hello and welcome back to Bits and Bobs. Today's video is the life and legacy of King Edward I of England. So here we begin with his father, who was King Henry III, who naturally, of course, as well reigned before Edward I. He was married to, of course, Edward I's mother, as we can see here, Eleanor of Provence. There we go. And of course, that couple had a son, and he was born on the 17th of June in 1239 and called Edward. And he was born at the Palace of Westminster in London and would go on to, of course, rule the kingdom as Edward I of England. So there we go. Now, during his childhood, Prince Edward back then, suffered from ill health, but he enjoyed education and military-related training and activities. In 1254, Henry III, his father, arranged a political wedding between Edward, who was only 15, and Eleanor of Castile, who was only 13, and was a second cousin of Edward, related from King John, and the two were wed that year. They were very much in love, and during their time wedded, they had 15 children, the eldest of which was Prince Edward, who would go on to be the second Edward of England, of course Edward II, after his father passes away. Now Edward I became much more healthy in his adulthood, and reached a height of 6'2", absolutely giant, still tall today, especially for back then, they were much shorter, and he was called Edward Longshanks after long legs. Now his father, King Henry III, died in 1272, and to that date, on the 20th of November, 1272, Edward I became King of England, aged 33. Now it was 2 years later that he was crowned at his coronation, which happened, as I say, quite a while afterwards, happening on the 19th of August in 1274, when he was crowned at Westminster Abbey. Now that he is king and he's been crowned, we'll go through a key events timeline of Edward I's reign. So then, in 1275, Edward I passes 51 new laws in line with the sort of themes laid out in the Magna Carta. Now then, Edward I's army defeats the Llangwellian Prince of Wales early in his reign, because at this time, of course, the Prince of Wales was the Prince of Wales, as Wales was a much more separate country than it is today and was in later medieval times and onwards. Now, during the 1280s, on Edward I's campaign around Wales, he built many castles, including, as we can see here, Conway Castle, and here, Caernarfon Castle. These are all castles that are still standing today and were built by Edward I in his campaigns, and as we can see here, this one, Harlech Castle, all built in Wales under Edward I's guidance, rule, and instruction. So there we go. Now then, in 1284, the Statute of Rhuddlan was signed, and this redivided Wales into shires under the English way of governance for local areas, so making Wales more English, as Edward I was campaigning around Wales. Now during this time in his campaigns in Wales, Edward II, or of course then Prince Edward, was born in 1284, he would go on to be king. In 1287, Edward I expels all Jews from his kingdom, so from England and from parts of Wales, all Jews are expelled. Now then, in 1290, Edward's wife, Eleanor, dies. This of course leaves Edward and their many children very sad at the passing of his wife Eleanor. With great influence over the Scottish throne, in 1292, Edward I appoints John Balliol as the King of Scotland. So the King of Scots, John Balliol, was chosen and selected by King Edward I. Now during the 1290s, many, if not all, of Edward I's new castles built under England's jurisdiction in Wales were attacked by Scottish rebellions, and they were sieged, like I say, in the late and mid-1290s. And during this time, in 1294 to 1295, over the winter, in the latter half of 1294 to the early 1295, Edward I is captured and kept hostage over the late winter of 1294. Returning to England in 1295, Edward I hosts the first model parliament. So sort of the beginnings of a parliament to be more recognised today. You can see there from the picture a sort of similar layout as more modern times. Continuing his campaigns in Wales, Edward I builds Beaumaris Castle, as we can see here, a lovely castle again, still standing today. In 1296, Edward I captures Edinburgh Castle, a very famous castle, and of course a very important castle to the Scottish, is captured by King Edward I, on a bit of a rampage around the British Isles, getting more and more land for England. Due to this, Scotland and France ally against England, so two powerful nations at the time ally against arguably the most powerful at the time, England, to help, each other. This doesn't go very well though, as John Balliol, who was appointed by Edward I, but turned against him, was captured in 1296 and held prisoner at the Tower of London, back in England, of course, back in London. During this time, the Stone of Scone, used for all Scottish coronations, is captured and brought to England, and is used then, rather than for Scottish coronations, for English coronations right up for 700 years to the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, who then returned it to Scotland to be kept in the castle, the Edinburgh Castle, in 1996, so exactly 700 years later, but it is brought back to London to be continued to be used for coronations, as we saw recently for Charles III. Angered by this, the leader of the Scottish army, William Wallace, leads a successful attack against the English at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, which was a battle victory for the Scottish. However, this of course angers Edward I, and he looks for retaliation, and so forth sends a very large English army up to Scotland, and the Battle of Falkirk is fought. This is an English victory, and it was fought in 1298. As we can see here, a depiction of it, a more modern depiction of what it might have looked like, but it was an English victory at the Battle of Falkirk. Now then, on the 10th of October 1299, Edward I marries Margaret of France, his second and final wife during his lifetime. Around the turn of the century, for 1300, Edward I continues to mount huge attacks of English army soldiers against Scotland, and sees great success in fighting both Scotland and his continued campaign in Wales. Due to this, Prince Edward, his son, is crowned Prince of Wales, so that's a still thing that's done today. The upcoming king is crowned Prince of Wales, and that was started by Edward I, who as well continued to, I'm just using the same source here, but continued to send large parts of his army up to Scotland to fight the Scottish. This was successful, as in 1305, William Wallace, the Scottish army leader, was captured and brought back to England to stand trial for, leading the Scottish rebellions and fighting against the English. He is charged with treason, and he is executed at the Tower of London. Of course, the Tower of London has a grim history of executions. After this, Robert the Bruce declares himself King of Scotland. Quite a famous Scottish king, Robert the Bruce, more famous than, say, William Wallace. And so he ascends the Scottish throne at this time in 1305. King Edward I is a popular monarch due to his military success against France, Wales, Scotland, all sort of neighbouring and nearby countries. He asserted dominance over, being the English ruler and making England a formidable fighting power of the 12 and 1300s. However, after all this, he died on the 7th of the 7th in 1307, a bit of a 7-related death, and he died not from battle or anything like that. He actually died of dysentery, so some dirty water killed off one of England's great warrior kings. After he did die, Edward II, his son, or Prince Edward, became Edward II as he ascended the throne, and was the first English king to be crowned with the coronation using the Stone of Scone. So there we go. Edward I reigned from 1272 to 1307, so a reign lasting 35 years, and a lifetime from 1239 to 1307, so a lifetime of 68 years. Not bad at all for the 1200s. So there we go. Comment down below any extra Edward I facts you have that we missed in this video, and of course as well, please subscribe to the channel for more history, coins, and information. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon for some more coins in the future on Bits and Bobs. Bye for now.